Hey guys, it's me again. I'm hitting you guys up with another video on D&D and OSR content. I just want to start today's video by telling you guys how ecstatic I am about the recent engagement. And I just want to thank everybody who has subscribed to the channel for doing so. I've been making videos on the channel for a couple of years now, and I was never really very consistent, and more recently I decided I wanted to be more consistent, and I've just been blown away by the cool ass people who've been checking out my videos and giving me feedback. So thanks guys, it's super cool. Today I'm going to be giving you guys my top tips and advice on starting your own D&D campaign in an old school Renaissance type way. I've been running games for close to a decade, and over the last few years especially, I've become a huge fanatic of OSR type games and content. Obviously, most D&D players prefer high fantasy, but I honestly think that shit sucks. There are obviously things that are very valuable about high fantasy, but I don't really think any of them, or very many of them, belong in my game. There's nothing more exciting to me than playing in a campaign with verisimilitude, grit, and genuine danger. My players count their rations, think about their equipment, and deal with things like lingering injuries that make them strategize when adventuring. I give bosses special abilities and phases that really get my players thinking about what they're doing. I want to jump straight into these tips. Number 1. Start small. I've noticed so many campaigns, especially these days, have a massive scale to them. Overwhelming yourself and your players is a quick way to see your campaign die. Focus on the quality, not the quantity. Spend your free time designing the tavern in your starting town, the personality of your NPCs as well, and the shops that they can frequent. Whilst it might be fun to develop dozens of kingdoms, your players are likely not going to give a shit about any of that if it's nothing to do with the plot and the story that's going on. It's all just fluff. And you've probably not got unlimited time to do all of this stuff. You should really spend your time developing the things that are going to be a lot more relevant to the actual sessions that you're running. I'd recommend designing a barony with 4 to 6 towns, including a keep where the baron lives. Keep things simple, add some forests, some hills, a few rivers and a lake, enough that your party can explore, but not too much that you're creating too much work for yourself, if you get what I'm saying. Have an idea of what regions and baronies are located to the north, east, south and west, and that's all you guys really need to know. I'll probably make a video in the future about how I design starter towns and the things that I consider about that. And if that does sound appealing to you guys, make sure that you're subscribed and you have the bell icon on so you can watch it when it comes out. I'm really trying to offer content that is difficult to find on YouTube. Number 2, create local plots and stories. Not every adventure needs to be about saving the princess, tricking the demon, or slaying a god. In OSR campaigns, I think the best adventure is a good dungeon. One where the inhabitants are causing problems for the local farmers and townsfolk. Perhaps it's a cave system of goblins who attack farmers on the nearby roads, stealing their livestock, their food, and sometimes their lives as well. Having bounties on the board for various monsters from your random encounter tables is also a good idea. Goblin hands, orc ears, or bandit heads is a good way to motivate the party to seek out danger. In my campaigns, the authorities typically want bandits alive, as they parade them in front of the townsfolk before giving them a trial and sentencing them to death. You've got to remember that these trials and public hangings, these were like social events in the medieval times. People would go out, have a chat, go for a drink afterwards. You know, it was a good old time. There wasn't really much going on in towns back then. But having 3 or 4 plot hooks at any given time, even if some of them are as simple as a bounty, at least gives your players options and direction. Later on, you can allow them to discover the lair of one of these bounties and develop an adventure around it. Maybe the bandit captain sends an assassin after one of the player characters who attempts to poison their drink at the local tavern. All because the party captured a few of his men and turned them into the authorities. Allowing actions to have reactions makes the game feel more real and can actually allow your players to develop real emotions and feelings towards the stories and the NPCs in your campaign. Number 3, get rid of con modifier from hit points. Combat in D&D takes too long. If you remove the con modifier from the player's HP, as well as the monsters, everything is quicker. Players are killed quicker. Monsters are killed quicker. The worst thing you can have at your table is for combat to be slow and grueling and dull. You want things to be action-packed. You want them to be dangerous. And just very dangerous. It needs to be very, very dangerous. I've had debates with other players about this rule, and like things like Dragon's Breath being too dangerous if players don't have their con modifier. If that's something that you're genuinely worried about, just lower the dice of a Dragon's Breath and other effects that do a lot of damage. Inflict Wounds is another one against low-level parties. It's really, really deadly, right? Maybe you don't use it until the players get to 2nd or 3rd level. That's something to consider. But I don't really change anything, and the reason why is because I like my games to feel very dangerous, and if you're fighting against a fucking dragon, it should be able to, to knock you unconscious from its fire breath. It ain't no fucking, it's not a gust of wind, my boy. It should be able to do some damage, and it should be able to take you out, especially if you're playing a wizard or a sorcerer or something that's like a d6, d8 hit dice, right? But anyway, if you want to go one further, you can actually make it so your players don't regain their HP on a long rest, but instead have to use their hit dice in order to do so. It actually adds attrition to dungeons and adventures that are longer, and it makes your players think about things, because it means that if they've had a really rough day, they might not be able to regain all of their HP when they rest, and they might have to use spell slots and lay on hands and second wind and shit like that in order to kind of get themselves back up to scratch again. I think attrition is fun. Before we continue, be aware that whilst I use all of this stuff in my games, it's probably not for everybody. I'm a huge medieval nerd, and I grew up on like Conan the Barbarian, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones. So my style of fantasy is low, swords and sorcery at best, right? So just be aware of that. Let's keep going now. Number 4, design new monsters or bring monsters back from older editions. It goes without saying that most tables have one guy in them who knows most of the monsters in the book. It's valuable to keep that guy, as well as everybody else in the party, on their toes. I'm always trying to tweak, adjust, and improve upon monsters that are already in the game, as well as adding in my own monsters and creatures fit to my setting. Sometimes I browse like Reddit and Tumblr and Pinterest, just looking for the weird shit that people have drawn like one afternoon, like doodles and stuff, and I come up with what they are and what they do, and I look for like stat blocks online that I can steal like the HP, the AC and stuff from, and I kind of like redesign their abilities. Like good DMs borrow, great DMs steal, and you should be looking at what other people are doing and what other people are making to give you inspiration to make some sick-ass monsters that are going to make your party go, holy shit, man. Like in my last campaign, I had more than 12 different variations of orc, and the reason why is because the party were trying to conquer a land that was ruled by orcs. So I had things like berserkers, man-catchers, hunters, warlocks, all sorts of stuff, right? And I just reskinned stat blocks from the monster manual, as well as things like the Kobold Press books. They've got some really good stuff in there. And I just added maybe some new abilities that were, orc-themed to replace the stuff that the class already had, or sorry, the stat block already had. Sometimes I've added monsters from, other modules as well, older modules from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like Dragonlance. Recently added in the Draconians, which are like bigger kobolds that can fly, is the best way I can describe them. For 5e, I just reskinned lizard folk and gave them a flight speed of 20 feet. I found some art of Draconians online, made it into a little token, and put it up on my Roll20. It was very, very simple. Obviously I'm an online DM mainly, so, that's what works well for me. But you can easily find art and miniatures on various websites to do all of that as well. Yeah, it's not a big deal. But I gave them, obviously a flight speed of 20 feet, which, isn't great, but, it's 40 feet on a dash. That's not too bad, especially if you're flying. There's nothing more scary than being ambushed by a bunch of draconians that literally fly down and just immediately attack you, the party. They have no time to react, right? They've got no time to position. Very exciting, and it keeps your players on their toes. Number 5, lingering injuries and setbacks. In my campaign, when players roll a natural 1 on a dangerous saving throw or a check, or get critically hit by a powerful monster, they can gain a lingering injury. I either decide arbitrarily what setback they gain, or I have them roll on my setbacks table, which I'm going to show you guys free of charge right now. It's a pretty fair system, and it's rare that any of my players are really unhappy to roll on it. It's a 2-tier system, which means that you have a 1 in 10 chance of a 1 in 20 chance of rolling something bad. Because all of the bad stuff is like 15 plus on the d20. But you have to roll a d10 in order for there to be a chance to roll on the d20. If you read number 10, it says that it's like you have to roll again. You know, you have to roll again, and now there's a chance you could roll something worse. And because it's 2-tiered, it's not as dangerous, but it still, you know, definitely puts the fear of God into your players. And that's what you want to do. You want to put the fear of God into your players in this kind of OSR vibe, but you don't actually want the campaign to necessarily be super deadly, because players are just going to get sad, especially if they actually develop and care about their characters. It's the illusion of danger, right? That's what our job is, I feel, at our tables. It's to give them the illusion of what could be around that corner, what not actually is. It's rare that anything crazy really comes from these tables, but letting players roleplay their injuries, as well as seeing the mechanical shift in their characters and their strategy in combat, it's always interesting to see. A part of the hero's journey is overcoming difficulty, overcoming adversity and obstacles. And while some players might not realise this straight away, most people get this as the campaign progresses, especially once they kind of look back on all of the stuff they've done in order to become the lord, the king, the champion that they are. I think really that's enough tips for now. But if you guys like this video and you give me some good feedback, I'm happy to do a part 2, which will include another 5 tips. Expect more content from me moving forward, guys. Thank you for watching. See you next time on Loki's Lair.